The small, unassuming man who entered the Spanish embassy in Madrid on a warm February morning in 1941 seemed an unlikely candidate to alter the course of world history. Juan Pujol Garcia, slight of build, soft-spoken, and possessed of an almost forgettable face, presented himself as a fervent Spanish nationalist with deep fascist sympathies and a burning desire to serve the Third Reich. The German military attaché who reluctantly agreed to meet him found little to suggest this. 30-year-old former chicken farmer and failed hotel manager would become one of the most consequential spies in military history. I wish to offer my services to Nazi Germany, whose ideology I deeply admire, Pujol explained in flawless German, his expression earnest. I can travel to Britain on Spanish diplomatic business and report on military activities there. The attaché, accustomed to such approaches from opportunists seeking payment for dubious information, made non-committal responses and ended the meeting quickly. Pujol left without the espionage assignment he had sought, but with a determination that would eventually lead to one of history's greatest deceptions. What the German officer could not have known, what almost no one knew, was that Juan Pujol Garcia harbored an intense hatred for fascism. Having fought briefly for the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War before deserting and hiding until the conflict's end, he had developed a profound revulsion toward totalitarian regimes. His offer to spy for Germany was the opening gambit in an audacious personal mission, to become a double agent for the Allies and contribute meaningfully to Hitler's defeat. Rejected by German intelligence and equally rebuffed in his attempts to contact British representatives in Madrid, Pujol made an extraordinary decision. If neither side would recruit him, he would create his own espionage operation from scratch. Using tourist guidebooks, a map of England, and copies of international newspapers available at Madrid's public library, he began fabricating intelligence reports about Britain as though he were already operating there as a German spy. Through persistence and a chance connection, Pujol finally secured a meeting with a German intelligence officer in Lisbon who proved more receptive than the Madrid attaché. Impressed by Pujol's apparent knowledge of British affairs and his ideological commitment, the officer assigned him the codename Arabelle and agreed to pay for information. Thus began one of the most remarkable deception operations of the war, conducted initially by a self-taught amateur acting entirely on his own initiative. From Madrid, Pujol sent his German handlers detailed reports about British military activities and naval movements in ports like Liverpool and Southampton, places he had never visited, based on information gleaned entirely from public sources and his own fertile imagination. When he described ship movements, he consulted tide tables and almanacs to ensure vessels would be able to navigate the harbors at the times he specified. To explain how a Spanish national was moving freely around wartime Britain, he invented a cover story about traveling as a commercial representative for his family business. Astonishingly, his German handlers believed him. More incredibly still, they considered his information so valuable that they began paying him substantial sums and requested even more detailed intelligence. Pujol, growing increasingly alarmed that his fabrications might inadvertently provide useful information to Nazi Germany, redoubled his efforts to contact British intelligence. In early 1942, MI5, Britain's domestic counterintelligence service, finally took notice of his activities after intercepting German communications referencing an apparently valuable spy in England whom they could not identify. British intelligence officer Thomas Harris, fluent in Spanish and experienced in counterespionage, arranged to bring Pujol to London in April 1942. After extensive debriefing that confirmed his anti-Nazi motivations and his remarkable success in deceiving German intelligence, MI5 formally recruited him as a double agent. They assigned him the code name Garbo, after Greta Garbo, the actress, because of his impressive performances. Under Harris's guidance, Pujol would transform from an amateur dissembling out of patriotic duty into the centerpiece of the most elaborate counterintelligence operation of World War II. The British immediately recognized Pujol's potential value in their developing deception strategy. Rather than expose his fabrications, they helped him construct an elaborate network of fictional sub-agents supposedly reporting to him from across Britain. Each fictional agent had a detailed backstory, personality traits, and specific areas of access to sensitive information. Eventually, this phantom network would grow to 27 entirely fictitious informants. including a Welsh nationalist, a disgruntled U.S. Army sergeant, a Venezuelan businessman, and a KLM airline pilot, Pujol, working closely with his MI5 handlers, composed hundreds of messages conveying carefully crafted misinformation to his German paymasters. British intelligence meticulously tracked which pieces of information the Germans particularly valued, gradually building their understanding of enemy intelligence priorities. The communications established Garbo's credibility through a delicate balance, providing some accurate but non-critical information to establish trustworthiness, then embedding crucial deceptions within this foundation of apparent reliability. The Germans' faith in their Spanish agent grew to extraordinary levels. By 1943, they considered Arabelle, as they still knew Pujol, their most valuable spy in Britain. They had no idea that every report was being crafted in an office at MI5 headquarters, or that the entire network of sub-agents feeding him information existed only on paper. So convincing was the operation that German intelligence sent Pujol congratulatory messages and awards, including the Iron Cross, making him possibly the only person decorated by both sides during the conflict. As Allied planning for the D-Day landings intensified, Garbo's role became increasingly central to Operation Fortitude, the massive deception campaign designed to mislead German high command about the timing and location of the invasion. The strategic question was straightforward but crucial: how to convince Hitler and his generals that the anticipated cross-channel attack would come at the Pas de Calais rather than Normandy, thereby ensuring critical German forces would be positioned away from the actual landing sites. The answer lay in fabricating an entire American army group that didn't exist. Through Garbo and other channels, Allied deception planners created the fictional 1st United States Army Group, FUSAG, supposedly commanded by General George S. Patton and massing in southeastern England opposite the Pas de Calais. The deception involved not just Pujol's reports, but also physical props, inflatable rubber tanks, plywood aircraft, and canvas-covered trucks positioned where German reconnaissance planes would spot them, alongside elaborate radio traffic simulating a large military formation preparing for action. Garbo's network began feeding consistent reports about FUSAG's composition, training activities, and apparent assault preparations. Pujol's fictional sub-agents described troop movements, special equipment being assembled, and overheard conversations among American officers about the coming attack. The Germans, who regarded Garbo's information as gold standard intelligence, integrated these reports into their strategic assessments at the highest levels. As D-Day approached, the deception operation entered its most critical phase. Pujol needed to provide information that would keep German forces fixed in the wrong location, not just before but after the actual landings began. The solution was audaciously simple. He would warn the Germans about the Normandy landings, but would ensure the warning arrived too late to be acted upon, thereby enhancing his credibility for subsequent messages, claiming Normandy was merely a diversion. In the pre-dawn hours of June 6, 1944, as the first Allied troops were already landing on Normandy beaches, Garbo sent an urgent message identifying the correct landing areas. As planned, technical difficulties delayed its transmission until after the invasion was underway, making the intelligence accurate but useless. He followed this with a series of reports insisting that Normandy was merely a feint. The real, larger invasion force under Patton was still preparing to strike at the Pas de Calais. Hitler and the German High Command, already predisposed to believe the Pas de Calais was the logical main invasion site and trusting implicitly in their star agents' information, took the bait completely. Hitler personally ordered the critical 15th Army to remain positioned opposite the Pas de Calais rather than reinforce Normandy. This decision, more than any other single factor, gave the Allied beachhead the critical time it needed to establish and expand its foothold in France. The deception's success became apparent in subsequent German communications, intercepted and decoded by British intelligence. On June 9th, 3 days after D-Day, German High Command sent Garbo a message declaring, "Your reports are confirming the opinion held by our High Command regarding Normandy as a diversion." They asked him to investigate signs of the real invasion preparation opposite the Pas de Calais. For weeks after D-Day, crucial German armored divisions remained in place, awaiting an invasion that would never come. Even more remarkably, as Allied forces broke out from the Normandy beachhead in late July, Garbo convinced his German handlers that a second, larger invasion was still imminent. This deception helped prevent the 15th Army from being deployed effectively against the actual Allied advance until it was too late to contain it. By the time the Germans realized they had been deceived, Allied forces were driving toward Paris and the liberation of Western Europe had become inevitable. Throughout this period, Pujol worked punishing hours, often drafting messages through the night to maintain the credibility and internal consistency of his elaborate web of fictions. The stress was immense. A single contradiction or error in the thousands of details across hundreds of messages could have unraveled the entire deception. MI5 records show that on D-Day alone, Garbo sent 17 separate messages totaling over 4,000 words. The longest a 2,000-word report sent at 3 a.m. This message was so significant that German intelligence immediately transmitted it to Hitler's headquarters. The extraordinary success of the Garbo operation stemmed from multiple factors. Pujol himself possessed remarkable qualities: a phenomenal memory, creative imagination, and intuitive understanding of what his German handlers wanted to believe. His MI5 case officer, Thomas Harris, contributed crucial expertise in intelligence tradecraft and psychological manipulation. Together, they constructed what counterintelligence experts now consider the most successful double-agent operation in history. Perhaps most remarkably, the Germans never suspected Garbo's duplicity. After the war, captured German intelligence officers expressed shock upon learning that their prized agent had been working for the enemy all along. They had trusted him so completely that even when some of his information proved incorrect, they assumed the errors came from his sub-agents rather than questioning his fundamental reliability. One Abwehr officer lamented, "We had complete confidence in him and his reports were always considered genuine. We had no grounds to suspect that the British knew about him." Pujol's extraordinary service earned him both the Member of the Order of the British Empire, MBE, from King George VI and the Iron Cross Second Class from Nazi Germany, making him almost certainly the only person in history to be decorated by both warring sides in the same conflict. After the war, fearing potential reprisals from surviving Nazi sympathizers, British intelligence helped Pujol fake his death from malaria in Angola in 1949. He relocated to Venezuela under an assumed identity, where he ran a bookstore and gift shop for decades. His remarkable story remained largely unknown until 1984, when a British writer tracked him down in Venezuela, leading to public recognition of his extraordinary contribution to Allied victory. Former intelligence colleagues who had worked with him during the war flew to Caracas for a reunion that none had thought possible. Thomas Harris embraced the agent he had guided through years of high-stakes deception, both men now elderly but still bearing the shared memory of their secret war. For decades after the war, military strategists and intelligence professionals studied the Garbo case as the gold standard of deception operations. Its success demonstrated how a carefully constructed web of partial truths and credible falsehoods, delivered by a source deemed reliable, could influence enemy decision-making at the highest levels. Modern military doctrine on deception operations draws directly from lessons learned through Pujol's work. Pujol himself remained modest about his extraordinary achievements. In his rare public appearances after his cover was blown, he insisted that he had been merely a small part of a much larger Allied effort. "I was just a tool in very expert British hands," he told one interviewer. But those who understood the full scope of his contribution recognized that without his unique talents, Operation Fortitude might never have achieved its crucial objective of fixing German forces away from Normandy during those vital first days of June 1944. When Juan Pujol Garcia died in 1988, his obituaries around the world celebrated the chicken farmer turned spy master, whose imagination, courage, and performance skills had helped change the course of World War II. The man who had once been unable to persuade either side to recruit him had ended up running an operation so successful that it influenced the strategic decisions of Adolf Hitler himself. His legacy stands as a testament to how a single individual, driven by moral conviction and armed with creativity rather than weapons, can shape the outcome of history's greatest conflicts. After his death, MI5 declassified additional details of the Garbo operation, revealing the full extent of Pujol's contribution. Military historians now broadly agree that without the successful D-Day deception that Garbo enabled, the Allied invasion might have faced catastrophic counterattacks in its vulnerable early stages. By one estimate, the operation saved tens of thousands of Allied lives and potentially shortened the European war by months. The chicken farmer from Barcelona had indeed changed history through what one intelligence officer later called the greatest imaginative feat of the entire war. The extraordinary success of the Garbo operation relied on more than just creative deception. It required meticulous attention to detail in creating and maintaining the elaborate fiction of Pujol's spy network. Each of his 27 fictional subagents needed consistent personalities, motivations, and access to information that aligned with their supposed positions. The entire network existed only on paper, in messages typed by Pujol and his MI5 handlers, yet to German intelligence, they were flesh and blood assets providing critical intelligence. From across Britain, among the most valuable of these phantom spies, was the fictional Agent 3, a supposed Venezuelan diplomat with access to high-level British government circles. Through this character, Pujol could relay seemingly sensitive political information that would be difficult for the Germans to verify. Another, Agent 4, was portrayed as a disgruntled Welsh nationalist working at an aircraft factory who provided technical details about RAF operations that were carefully crafted mixtures of public information, outdated intelligence, and plausible fabrications. The administration of this fictional network required extraordinary organization. MI5 established a special filing system to track every detail attributed to each subagent, ensuring consistency across hundreds of messages spanning years of operation. If Agent 7 had reported being in Glasgow in April, any subsequent message had to account for how and why he had moved to a new location. If the secretary character had mentioned a brother in the Royal Navy, that detail might resurface months later in a seemingly casual aside that reinforced the character's reality. To maintain the network's credibility, Pujol and his handlers employed a calculated strategy of occasionally allowing his fictional agents to fail or make mistakes. One subagent might provide information that turned out to be incorrect, leading Garbo to fire them in messages to his German controllers. This not only mirrored the natural imperfections of real intelligence networks, but allowed the British to explain away any inconsistencies that might have crept into the deception. The mechanics of communication represented another layer of complexity in the operation. Messages to German intelligence were transmitted by radio from a secret MI5 facility, with the precise encryption protocols and transmission schedules that the Abwehr expected from a clandestine agent. The content was first drafted by Pujol in Spanish, translated into English, reviewed by intelligence officers for security and strategic alignment, then encoded using the secret systems provided to Pujol by his German handlers. This process often took hours for a single message, with Pujol working through the night to maintain the timelines his controllers expected. The operation nearly collapsed several times due to unforeseen complications. In one heart-stopping incident in 1943, Pujol fabricated a story about one of his agents traveling to Bristol and reporting on a convoy preparing to sail to Malta. Days after sending this information, British newspapers reported that a convoy had indeed departed for Malta and had been attacked by German submarines with significant losses. Pujol was devastated, believing his fictional report had somehow led to real Allied casualties. In reality, the convoy's departure had been planned well before his message and was not influenced by it. But the coincidence highlighted the fine line the deception was walking. After this incident, British intelligence established stricter protocols, ensuring that Pujol's fictional intelligence could never accidentally align with actual military operations unknown to his handlers. Military movements were checked against his reports before transmission to prevent any inadvertent disclosure of genuine plans. Another close call came when one of Pujol's messages contained information about airplane production at a factory in a specific location. Unknown to his British handlers, this factory had recently been moved due to bombing, something the Germans would know from their reconnaissance. Fortunately, Pujol's quick thinking saved the situation. When questioned by his German controllers, he fabricated an elaborate explanation involving his agent confusing similar place names due to unfamiliarity with English geography. Rather than damaging his credibility, the incident seemed to humanize his fictional network, making the deception more believable. The relationship between Pujol and his MI5 handler, Tomas Harris, became one of history's most productive intelligence partnerships. Harris, born to a wealthy art-dealing family with Spanish heritage, brought sophistication and psychological insight that complemented Pujol's creativity and commitment. During the most intense periods of the operation, the two men worked in adjoining offices at MI5 headquarters, sometimes for 20 hours straight, crafting and refining the messages that would shape German strategic thinking. Harris understood that successful deception required more than just plausible information. It needed to align with the target's pre-existing beliefs and expectations. He studied intercepted German communications meticulously, building a psychological profile of Pujol's controllers that allowed them to tailor messages for maximum impact. When intelligence suggested that a particular German officer was suspicious by nature, they would draft messages with subtle inconsistencies for that officer to catch, thereby reinforcing his confidence in his own analytical abilities while distracting him from the larger deception. The human dimension of Pujol's wartime experience reveals the personal toll of his extraordinary deception. Living under constant security restrictions in a London suburb with his wife and young children, he maintained a cover story even with his neighbors. His wife knew only that he worked for British intelligence, not the full scope of his activities. The stress manifested physically. He developed ulcers and lost weight precipitously during the crucial months before D-Day, when the volume and critical importance of his communications increased dramatically. A particularly poignant episode occurred in early 1944 when Pujol's young son became seriously ill with diphtheria. Despite his personal distress, he continued drafting deception messages from the child's hospital bedside, knowing that any interruption in communication could raise German suspicions at this critical juncture in war planning. His son recovered, but the incident illustrated the relentless demands of his role. There could be no pause in the performance, no matter what personal crises arose. The financial aspects of the Garbo operation added another layer of complexity. The Germans paid Pujol handsomely for his supposed intelligence, with payments sometimes reaching the modern equivalent of tens of thousands of dollars per month. This money was transferred through complicated arrangements involving Portuguese banks and commercial covers. British intelligence carefully documented every payment, both as evidence of the operation's success and to ensure proper handling of enemy funds. What Pujol's German handlers never suspected was how their own payment system was being used against them. The MI5 team studied the payment amounts to gauge which pieces of information the Germans valued most highly, adjusting subsequent deceptions to emphasize these areas. When payments increased after reports about specific military units, they knew they had touched on a German intelligence priority and would develop that thread further. The elaborate nature of the deception extended to physical props that supported the fictional narrative. When Pujol claimed one of his agents had stolen official stationery from a military headquarters, MI5 created fake letterhead that he could include with his reports. When he mentioned an agent traveling with a particular military unit, intelligence officers would ensure the unit's actual movements aligned with what had been reported. These physical touches helped create what intelligence professionals call verisimilitude, the appearance of truth that makes deception credible. The climax of the Garbo operation came in the days immediately following the D-Day landings. With Allied troops fighting to establish their beachhead in Normandy, Pujol's messages played a crucial role in reinforcing Hitler's fatal misinterpretation of the invasion as a feint. On June 9th, 3 days after the initial landings, he sent his most audacious message, a long, detailed report explaining that Normandy was merely a diversion and providing intelligence about the fictitious main force still preparing to strike at the Pas de Calais. This message, transmitted directly to German high command and seen by Hitler himself, contributed significantly to one of history's most consequential military misjudgments. Wehrmacht records captured after the war revealed that this report was treated as the authoritative assessment of Allied intentions, directly influencing the decision to hold critical panzer divisions away from Normandy during the crucial first week of the invasion. By mid-June, as the reality of the Normandy invasion became impossible to deny, Pujol faced his greatest challenge, explaining why the second, larger invasion he had predicted had not materialized. With characteristic creativity, he sent a message expressing confusion and reporting that the troops of the fictional 1st U.S. Army Group were being loaded onto ships, but then mysteriously unloaded. He suggested technical problems or weather issues might have caused delays, buying critical time for the actual invasion forces to strengthen their position. Even as late as July, with Allied forces breaking out from the Normandy beachhead, Pujol's fictional network continued reporting signs of an imminent second invasion. This persistent deception helped keep German reinforcements tied down in the Pas-de-Calais region long after they could have made a difference in Normandy. By the time German high command fully accepted that they had been deceived, Allied forces were driving toward Paris, and the liberation of Western Europe had become inevitable. The aftermath of the successful invasion brought new challenges for Pujol and his handlers. As the Allies advanced across France, his fictional agents needed plausible explanations for continuing to access valuable intelligence. Some were reassigned to new locations, while others were gradually retired from active reporting. Throughout this transition phase, the core deception maintained its credibility with German intelligence, who never suspected they had been systematically misled for years. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, British intelligence faced a dilemma regarding Pujol's future. Having played such a high-profile role in deceiving Nazi Germany, he faced potential danger from remaining Nazi sympathizers seeking revenge. Additionally, his expertise in deception operations made him a valuable intelligence asset but also a liability if captured by Soviet intelligence as the Cold War began to emerge. The solution was an elaborate disappearing act worthy of Garbo's fictional creations. With MI5's assistance, Pujol faked his own death from malaria in Angola in 1949, complete with death certificate and obituary notices. He then relocated to Venezuela under an assumed identity, where he ran a small business and lived quietly for decades, his extraordinary wartime service known only to a handful of intelligence officials. Pujol built a new life in Caracas, remarrying after his separation from his first wife and raising a family who knew nothing of his secret past. For years, even his children were unaware that their unassuming father had once run one of the most successful intelligence operations in history. He maintained this cover successfully until 1984, when British journalist Nigel West, a pseudonym for former MP Rupert Allison, tracked him down after years of research. The revelation of Pujol's survival and whereabouts created a sensation in intelligence circles and led to long overdue public recognition of his extraordinary service. Former colleagues from MI5, now elderly themselves, traveled to Caracas for an emotional reunion with the agent they had believed dead for 35 years. For Pujol, this recognition brought a sense of completion to a life defined by secrets and disguises. In 1984, he returned to London for the 40th anniversary of D-Day, where he was received with honors by former intelligence colleagues and military leaders who understood the full significance of his contribution. During this visit, he toured the beaches of Normandy, seeing for the first time the landing sites his deception had helped to secure. Standing on Omaha Beach, he reportedly wept as he contemplated the lives saved through his elaborate web of fictions. The technical aspects of the Garbo operation have had lasting influence on intelligence practices worldwide. The case is still studied at intelligence academies as the gold standard of deception operations, demonstrating how a properly managed double agent can influence enemy decision-making at the highest levels. Modern counterintelligence doctrine draws directly from techniques pioneered by Pujol and his handlers, particularly their systematic approach to building credibility through a careful mixture of truth, half-truth, and fiction. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Garbo case was its bloodless nature. Unlike many intelligence operations that involve violence or direct sabotage, Pujol's work relied entirely on imagination and persuasion. He never carried a weapon, never directly engaged in combat, yet his impact on the war's outcome was more significant than that of many military divisions. His story stands as a testament to the power of information and deception in warfare, how words, properly deployed, can be more decisive than bullets or bombs. Juan Pujol Garcia's motivation throughout remained consistent with his initial impulse in 1941, a deep moral opposition to totalitarianism in all its forms. Unlike many in the intelligence world who became cynical through exposure to deception and betrayal, he maintained a clear ethical compass and a simple explanation for his extraordinary service. I had to do something to help create a better world. In his rare interviews after his cover was blown, Pujol reflected on the strange path that led a failed chicken farmer and hotel manager to the center of one of history's pivotal conflicts. "I was not a professional spy," he insisted. "I was just an ordinary man who found himself in extraordinary circumstances and tried to do the right thing." This understated self-assessment belied both his natural talents for deception and the immense impact of his work. Intelligence historians now recognize that Pujol possessed a rare combination of qualities that made him exceptionally well-suited to his role. His phenomenal memory allowed him to maintain consistency across thousands of fictional details. His intuitive understanding of human psychology helped him craft messages that would resonate with his German controllers' expectations and biases. Most importantly, his absolute conviction in the moral necessity of his deception gave him the determination to maintain his performance through years of intense pressure. When he died in 1988, tributes came from intelligence services around the world, acknowledging a man whose imagination had helped shape the outcome of World War II. The chicken farmer who had once been rejected by both German and British intelligence services had ended up running an operation so successful that it influenced the strategic decisions of Adolf Hitler himself. In the words of Sir John Masterman, who ran Britain's double-agent system, "In Garbo, we had an agent of transcendent quality, whose services in misleading the enemy were of such value as to defy assessment." Pujol's legacy extends beyond his specific wartime achievements to embody a broader truth about human conflict. That courage takes many forms, not all of them on the battlefield. His weapon was his mind. His battlefield was the realm of perception and belief, but the lives he saved were no less real for the intangible nature of his combat. The thousands of Allied soldiers who survived the D-Day landings because German reinforcements were pointing in the wrong direction would never know the name of the Spanish double agent whose creativity had helped protect them, but his impact on their fate was nonetheless decisive. The full extent of the Garbo operation remained classified for decades after the war, with many details only emerging in the 1970s and 1980s, as intelligence archives were gradually opened. Even today, intelligence historians believe some aspects of the case may remain sealed, particularly those relating to the technical methods used to maintain secure communications with German controllers. What is clear from the available record is that Pujol's operation represented a perfect synthesis of individual talent and institutional support. His natural gifts for deception, amplified by MI5's professional expertise and resources. Neither could have succeeded without the other. But together they created what many consider the most successful intelligence deception in military history. The ultimate tribute to Juan Pujol Garcia may be the assessments of his adversaries. When German intelligence officers were interrogated after the war and informed that their prized agent Arabelle had been working for the British all along, their initial reaction was complete disbelief. When finally convinced by irrefutable evidence, one Abwehr colonel said simply, "I would like to meet this man who deceived me so completely. I would like to shake his hand. He is the one who really won the war." That handshake never took place. The security concerns that prompted Pujol's disappearance to Venezuela prevented any such meeting. But the German officer's assessment was shared by many military historians who have studied the critical early days of the Normandy invasion. Without the breathing space provided by Garbo's deception, keeping German armored divisions fixed in the wrong location, the vulnerable Allied beachhead might well have been pushed back into the sea. In the final analysis, Juan Pujol Garcia's extraordinary success stemmed from understanding a fundamental truth about human intelligence, that people tend to believe what they expect and want to hear. By carefully aligning his fictional reports with German preconceptions and prejudices, he exploited cognitive biases that exist in all human decision-making. His legacy is not just in the specific deception he orchestrated, but in demonstrating how perception, management can shape reality in warfare. And beyond the chicken farmer from Barcelona who became Agent Garbo had changed history not through force of arms, but through force of imagination. In doing so, he demonstrated that in warfare, as in life, the stories we believe can be as consequential as the physical realities we face. The greatest spy master of World War II never fired a shot in anger, but his fictional creations helped ensure Allied victory as surely as any division of tanks or infantry. In the shadowy world of espionage, Juan Pujol Garcia stands as a reminder that sometimes the mightiest weapon is the human mind, properly directed toward a worthy cause. The chicken farmer from Barcelona, who became Agent Garbo, had changed history not through force of arms, but through force of imagination. In doing so, he demonstrated that in warfare as in life, the stories we believe can be as consequential as the physical realities we face. The greatest spy master of World War II never fired a shot in anger, but his fictional creations helped ensure Allied victory as surely as any division of tanks or infantry. When Juan Pujol Garcia died in 1988, he left behind a legacy that intelligence services worldwide still study and admire. The unassuming man who had once been rejected by both German and British intelligence had orchestrated the most successful deception operation of the war, influencing decisions at the highest levels of Nazi command. His extraordinary achievement stands as testament to the power of human ingenuity and moral conviction in the face of tyranny. In the shadowy world of espionage, where success is often measured in secrets kept rather than glory earned, Juan Pujol Garcia remains the master of a craft few will ever fully appreciate, the art of making fiction so compelling that it changes the course of reality. His story reminds us that sometimes the mightiest weapon is the human mind, properly directed toward a worthy cause. The end.